was reopen the firm, keep it running, and then take all of that money and continue to help many of the families. And we want to pay homage because we actually have a child of a Cantor Fitzgerald employee who now works for us. And she lost her dad many years ago on that fateful day. Jackie D'Angelo, she is our babe. We love her so much. But as you reach back and you remember all of those workers, including your brother Gary, what's the one thing that you really hope people really understand about what happened that day?
Sarah Ferguson, Prince Andrew's ex-wife, paid tribute to the victims of the attack on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. On the 22nd anniversary of the terrorist attack, she revealed a surprising detail. She almost became one of the victims of the attack. My charity Chances for Children was located on the World Trade Center end tower. I was meant to be there that morning 22 years ago, but an interview ran late. The little red doll, the charity's mascot, was found in the rubble. Today I'm thinking of those who lost their lives, she shared on her Instagram story. Sarah Ferguson was lucky that she was late and wasn't in the Twin Towers when the two planes crashed into the buildings.
In light of what happened at the World Trade Center?
Well, Alan, we've always had, as you know, very, very strong security, but there's very little you can do about planes crashing into a building. I mean, you look at Larry Silverstein, who's a terrific owner in New York and a very good friend of mine who I just called. I was very worried about him because I assumed maybe he was in the building. He took possession of the building 1 week ago. As you know, he just bought the World Trade Center.
Right.
And he was in his office, and he was getting ready to move into the World Trade Center over the next 2 weeks. So when I just spoke to him, there's nothing you can do when people are going to be bombing planes at your building. Now, I guess maybe the world is going to be changing, and maybe you're going to have F-16s flying all over the city, etc. But it's a pretty tough situation.
Donald, you have one of the landmark buildings down in the financial district, 40 Wall Street. Did you have any damage, or did you know what's happened down there?
Well, it was an amazing phone call I made. 40 Wall Street actually was the second tallest building in downtown Manhattan, and it was actually before the World Trade Center was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest. And I just spoke to my people, and they said it's the most unbelievable sight. It's probably 7 or 8 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and yet Wall Street is littered with 2 feet of stone and brick and mortar and steel. And there are thousands of people walking over the debris over the Brooklyn Bridge, where they're sending them out over the Brooklyn Bridge to Brooklyn, and then I guess they're going to have to figure out how to get home from there. But they have between 1 foot and 2 feet of debris right in front of a building that's probably, you would say, Alan, 6 or 7 blocks away.
Donald, this is Roland Smith.
Hi, Roland.
You know, how you doing on this kind of day? You know, at some point, we're going to put all this behind us. And you, as a visionary, particularly in New York real estate, what do you think that we ought to do as a city, as a people, when all of this when the mourning stops, when the dead are honored, and we've found out what caused it and maybe corrected it? What does the city need to do?
Well, I guess the big thing that you really will have to do is never forget. You just can't forget that something like this happened.
The Duchess of York said the item was discovered by a volunteer, Brian Van Flandern, who found the rag doll amongst the rubble following the September 11 terror attacks that killed 996 people. Little Red was in Charity's office located on the 101st floor of the World Trade Center's North Tower when a group of extremists hijacked and crashed 2 planes into the Twin Towers during the 9/11 attacks. Sarah told the BBC, "Because our office is on the 101st floor, Little Red always sat on the window looking over New York, and over the United States as I imagine she did, because she is a little red rag doll, standing at about 12 inches. On the day of the terrible disaster, she was found in the rubble by a fireman who put her in his helmet and carried her out." Mr. Flandern, an emergency medical technician, searched the area in vain for a survivor victim nearby, out of fear that the doll belonged to a child who was trapped under the rubble. However, He later learned that the doll was from the Chances for Children's office after the Duchess of York told the news who the item belonged to. Speaking to the BBC in 2014, Sarah said, and when it came on TV, I looked and saw Little Red, and the presenter said, oh look, there's a child's doll, and I immediately called up the presenter and said, please, don't worry. Because I was so worried they would think that a child was lost or buried in the rubble. So I said, no, it's not a child's doll, it's Little Red, and she is a symbol for Chances for Children. Said the item was...
Get her out of Virginia. And they said, let's check. And about 3 hours later, they called. They said, okay, there's a tour bus, and they can pick her up in 3 hours, but there's a catch. She has to share it with Warren Haynes from Government Mule and the Allman Brothers. And I said, okay. And I knew him. He's the sweetest man in the world. He's and the Allman Brothers. And I from Government Mule and the Allmans from Government Mule and the Allman Brothers. Haynes from Government Mule and the Allman Brothers. And I said, okay. And I knew him. He's the sweetest man in the world. He's amazing. So I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, I got you a bus. Start packing. But listen, you got to share it with this dude from the Allman Brothers. And I said, I promise. He's the sweetest guy in the world. And so he and my mother jumped on a tour bus, came all the way across country to California, and the two of them made best friends. Isn't that great?
Wow.
So many of you know my story a little bit. I was taking my son Kyle, who's now 28, to his first day of kindergarten that fateful day on September 11th. And that's why I'm alive today. I ran down...
How has this day changed for you? How has it broadened out for you, Howard? Because, you know, it's been 14 years, and I'm sure that every year, of course, you want to continue to raise money, continue to well, never forget. How do you do that this year, 14 years later? Well, never forget. Well, never forget. How do you do that this year, 14 years later?
Well, what's amazing is you have...
Probably, you would say, Alan, 6 or 7 blocks away.
Donald, this is Roland Smith. Donald, this is Roland Smith.
Hi, Roland. A building that's probably, you would say, Alan, 6 or 7 blocks away. A building that's probably, you would say, Alan, 6 or 7 blocks away. Building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation. And it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural... that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural about 3 or 4 days after it took place because about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building, and I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out. And so this was an unbelievably powerful building. Center folks, I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that...
Apparently YouTube must have known I had been thinking about this again. Okay, so we're going to do a short celebrity word salad here. This is related to Billie Jean King, the tennis player from back in the 70s. So this is a blur word. E-Jean, Billie... L-Y Jean, E-Jean, it's a blur word, E-Jean. Seems to be popular. Billie Jean, the song by Michael Jackson. He was married to Lisa Marie. In this time, Donald Trump was hanging out with Michael Jackson, kind of studying him. Whoever would have thought about that? But it's just something that was taking place. And then you've got the E. Jean Carroll thing. What was it, $100 million or something? Mary Trump was also broadcasting on YouTube today. I'd never seen her. I didn't even know she had a YouTube channel, but apparently she has Mary Trump Media or something. MTM, Mary Trump Media. And so I just wanted to mention the short I'm just going to call it a short celebrity word salad here. I mean, because we can go on and on with this. And a lot of people don't even remember Ryan White, the little boy that Michael Jackson hung out with. And there's a video on YouTube of Donald Trump. And there was a car in the front yard of that Michael, I think Michael had given it to Ryan maybe or something, I'm not sure. Jackson. And I think it was before he was married to Lisa Marie. And then, which Lisa Marie was, of course, Elvis Presley's daughter. And so Michael Jackson had studied Elvis Presley quite a bit for some reason, and some people have proclaimed that Elvis Presley never actually died. He just wanted out of the spotlight. Now you got to remember, Elvis Presley also was in the United States military. Michael Jackson.
Hello, I'm Howard Lutnich, the Chairman and Chief Executive of Cantor Fitzgerald. Many of you may remember that Cantor Fitzgerald was located on the 101st to the 105th floors of the World Trade Center. We lost 658 of our 960 New York-based employees that fateful day. I lost my brother Gary, he was 36. I lost so many of my friends and colleagues. The 9/11 Memorial Museum has done an incredible job, both remembering those that I loved, but also telling the story. Now, the 9/11 Memorial Museum has the ability to convene, and one of them I find most incredible is their Summit on Security. They bring together government officials, executives, people who think about the issues of security in a way that is deeper and more thoughtful. The Summit on Security also brings forward lots of the lessons that were learned after 9/11. So I would encourage you to come to the summit, and I think you'll find it incredibly, incredibly helpful. Thank you.
So, Sissy, this is for you with affection. My late mother-in-law used to say that nothing can be said can begin to take away the anguish and the pain of these moments, because grief is the price we pay for love. And how right she was. And go forward, we can light the flame. So for Riley, for Harper and Finley, and for the entire family, we march forward in support of you. All of us are with you, and we will help you as best you can. If you just put out your hand, we will be there. And we will be there, well, I will definitely be there. So David Frost.